Hello again, awesomers. It is your old buddy, Steve Simonson, coming back with again a live episode of that dingdangawesomers.com podcast. And you know what? This is Ding Dang episode 237, episode 237. Can you believe it, everybody? This long running series is accessible online. And you know what you do? You go to awesomers.com/237 and you can find this episode, or you can just go to awesomers.com/podcast to see all of the episodes laid out with links. I think that's how it works. Now, we're in the midst of Steve's Axiom Mini Series, and we're now at the end, Axiom number 22. Now, again, I said this earlier, but I want to just repeat it in case you happen to not remember and or miss the episode. Axiom 0 was kind of made as the most important one, but the rest of the axioms are not graded by importance. Their number is based on the sequential time that I thought to write them down and add them to the list, not their kind of importance overall. So number 22 is no less important than number 1 or 3 or 6 or whatever. In fact, this is one of my favorites, and you'll know why it's important to me as I get into my explanation. So let's just jump right in to Axiom 22. So Axiom 22 states that you should embrace the law of parsimony. Now, what is the law of parsimony, you might ask, right? So sometimes they call it, by the way, the principle of parsimony. And so when it's referred to as the principle of parsimony, they're often saying things like the scientific principle of things are usually connected or behave in the simplest or most economical way, especially in reference to alternative evolutionary pathways. So it's a little complex, but let me try to break it down. So when people say the principle of parsimony, sometimes they might call it parsimony or whatever. I don't know. I can just call it parsimony. But they're basically saying in science, when you have alternative explanations, go with the simplest or most economical explanation, right? So that's the principle. But there's also the law of parsimony that maybe states it a little bit more clearly. And essentially that boils down to the simplest explanation of an event or observation is the preferred explanation. And it kind of basically says, I like that my English is kind of basically not awesome. No, what the law of parsimony is saying to me is that the simplest explanation is probably the correct explanation. And that's actually true in science, and that's true as people observe. You might also think of Occam's razor, which is those are parallel concepts, Occam's razor and the law of parsimony, that if you really boil it down, you go, let's get rid of the most complex answers and solutions, and let's just think of what is the most likely solution or the simplest solution. That then becomes, by default, the most likely solution. So the beauty of this, and I love it because I own a company called parsimony.com, right? It's something, and we named our software specifically on this principle of simplest solution, most likely solution. By the way, the most economical solution is probably the best solution as well, right? That's part of that principle. And in many ways, we boil that down to a prior axiom, which is doing more with less, right? So the law of parsimony is all about you applying critical thinking and you saying to yourself, I've got this really, serious supply chain problem, and I've got this solution proposed by agency number 1, and there's 10 steps to that solution, and it costs me $10,000. And I got solution 2, and it takes 3 steps, and it costs me $3,000. Now, if you can see that the engineering is correct on both of them, the law of parsimony would want you to embrace the more economic and simple choice. Now, again, you have to, I'm using very simplified explanations and kind of analogies here to give you a clear-cut answer. There may be plenty of times where you're like, oh no, the result I want requires 10 steps and more money. Fine, that's okay. But in the absence of clear data, you should be informed by simplest and most economical being the probable, likely correct answer. This is true if you are trying to solve crime. This is true if you are trying to work with an economic problem. This is true if you're dealing with an HR problem or an inventory problem. You must embrace the law of parsimony. This is why Axiom 22 was written. If you understand the law of parsimony and then you embrace it and you make it part of kind of your culture and part of who you are as a company, you are far better off than your competitors, because you're going to try to do more with less. You're going to try to find the simplest solutions being the most obvious solutions. All of those are good news for you, right? There's no part of you that should be trying to engineer the more complex outcome, engineer the worst answer, engineer the hardest answer, engineer the most expensive answer. So, instinctively, we're drawn to the beauty of parsimony, right? The beauty of Occam's razor, but we sometimes set it aside, thinking, well, in this complex world, probably more complex answers are the right answers. And again, most often, that's not the case. So whether it's science, economics, human interaction, functional kind of process, embracing the law of parsimony can give you an edge. Because instead of you starting with, I need all the bells and whistles, you're like, let me synthesize this thing down to the most basic elements, and then what I have to do to accomplish those basic elements, right? Whatever success looks like after it's synthesized. Get rid of all the ruffles and the fluffy, right? If you ever watch Seinfeld, they had the pirate shirt. Forget the pirate shirt, right? Just put on a t-shirt. Is that enough of a solution? If so, how do you get there? Simplest answers wins, right? And especially when you're trying to conquer a problem, you're going through your frustrations and you're like, the same problem keeps happening. Look for what's the most obvious answer, right? Bank's not adding up. Who's stealing from you, right? Who's doing the deposits? Where are these withdrawals coming from that you don't recognize? These things are sometimes too simple, right? And so we tend to overlook the simplest answers because we think, well, how could that be so simple, or how could this be so obvious? And I've missed it this whole time. And the answer is maybe you were not embracing the law of parsimony, right? Axiom 22 couldn't be more clear. And I'm surprised that it's taken you this long to know about Axiom 22. Although, in fairness, this may be the first time you've listened to this podcast. And so, yeah, I guess it's okay for you to just learn about it now. I've given it some thought. You're all right. I'm letting you off the hook. What I want you to, again, dive into is the law of parsimony as it relates to your business. As you think about it, I want you to, think about what can you do to make parsimony work for you. And there are more, let me call them rigid definitions of parsimony. So another person would define parsimony as saying like extreme frugality or use of caution in spending with money, like to a negative, like a great reluctance to spend money unnecessarily, like we're being cheap, right? But there's a difference between cheap and value, right? Doing more with less, getting more results with less investment, that's a good thing. But doing it and choking off the resources unnecessarily, that's not a good thing. And one of my favorite examples of this is one of my old buddies. We were traveling around and we stayed in a place in Miami, and it was not so good, right? Glass, we're checking in the kind of a motel style. There's glass on the bulletproof glass on the check-in window. It's like, oh, this is weird. We go to the next place. It's like, man, this place is from the 40s. I don't understand. It's right by the airport, pretty ugly. And I say, what's going on with these hotels? And he's like, hey, law of parsimony, I'm embracing it. Woo! I found the cheapest places. And I'm like, whoa. Right? I've sent the wrong message. This is on me. I said, let me pick the hotel in the next place. Give me the budget you spent here. Gave me the budget. And I think I spent $10 more for like this 4-star, beautiful in Atlanta, Buckhead, 2-bedroom condo. Like it wasn't like $10 better. It was like, 1,000 times better. And it was safe and it was beautiful. And I'm like, so for me, it's not just extreme frugality, right? As somebody who's thinking of the strictest definitions of parsimony, but it is in fact the use of doing more with less, getting the best outcome, the most value, the highest ROI with the minimum kind of investment of time or resources or money or what have you. And I don't want you to think about, parsimony. So, Occam's razor is kind of that simplest explanation is most likely the correct explanation, right? That's the Occam razor version. But parsimony has kind of these different principles and different kind of law definitions. And so I'm mashing that up for you. And I'm basically just telling you, if you are applying, simple is better than complex. Cheaper is better than more expensive. In general, these can produce good results for you. You will have, if your organization and yourself, you embrace the law of parsimony, you're going to find better results with less risk, better results with less time, better results with less money invested. And that's because you're being a practical look and being a practical applicator of the law of parsimony. So when I think of Axiom 22, it's not about doing the cheapest thing. It's not just about remembering Occam's razor, right? Simplest explanation, most likely the correct explanation. It's saying, how do we put that into our decision-making process, right? When we're making a new purchase decision, when we're, kind of doing forecasting, when we're making a freight forwarding choice, it's a multivariate equation, right? It's not just cost. It's not just timing. It's not just, kind of resources. It's kind of the whole version of those put together. And then if one of those variables can make the choice, fine. That embraces the law of parsimony. But if you need all of them, also fine. Just make sure that you kind of boil it down to the simplest point that you can. So parsimony is, again, I own parsimony.com, right? That cost me money. We've created a company called Parsimony that has, full enterprise software for big companies. Little guys can use it too, but sometimes they find it a little bit, let's say, what's the right word? Overwhelming. There's also, Parsimony has an offshoot called SOP Box that is perfect for any company's SOPs. If you don't know how to do SOPs, if you don't have a database for them, if you don't have access to them easily with all of your people in your company, and then you definitely need SOP Box. And just go to parsimony.com and go to the pricing and order your SOP Box today. It works for any industry: e-commerce, real estate, service, sales, securities law, law firms, accounting firm, any business needs SOPs, and they need them kind of in the special way the SOP Box works. That's how much I believe in parsimony. Simple, cheaper, better, right? Doing more with less, another axiom. And that truly is what parsimony means to me. So when you go and you read like extreme frugality, or, especially when it comes to spending money, we're going to be, penny pinching. That's not embracing the full law, certainly not as I see it or define it. I'm saying, yes, I want to do more with less, but I'm saying that I want to do it in such a way that generates the most value. So in terms of that ROI, if you put in, kind of the minimum amount and you get 40% return, great. But if you put in 10% more and now you get 100% return, do the extra 10%. That's where the value is. And again, every concept, return on investment, etc., there's such a thing as called the efficient frontier, and you can go Google that and look that up on your own time. But my point is, there's a level that's too low where you're spending too much and getting too little, and then there's a point where it comes over the top and it's no longer efficient. And your mission is to get close as you can to that efficient frontier of time, of investment, of resource allocation, etc. So I am a huge, huge believer of Axiom 22, and I encourage you also to embrace the law of parsimony, as I do. So this is episode number 237. Pop on over to awesomers.com/237. You'll see the show notes, details, etc. And this actually is the end of the Axiom Mini Series, Steve's Axiom Mini Series, episode 22. There's only 22 axioms, not 26, as I said in some earlier episodes. I don't really count them that often, and I don't memorize the numbers, as you can see that. But these are 22 kind of axioms or laws or principles or guidelines or whatever you want to call them, gold nuggets, that you guys and gals can take a look at and decide, do these have value to me? Does any of this resonate with me? Have I seen any of the um, kind of benefits of using some of these principles, but I haven't yet figured out how to articulate them? Or have I seen the downsides of not putting some of these principles in place? Both of those are good reasons to adopt those. And then think about, how are you going to kind of make them a part of you? And then how can you make them a part of your organization, right? Having the knowledge in your head, that helps you. Great, wonderful, intellectual equity. Nobody can take that from you. But it really will pay dividends, right? If you can figure out how to get that, some of the principles, the ones you think are most important throughout your organization. That's why I'm doing this, right? You didn't have to pay anything to be here. And I begged you for reviews throughout this mini series, and you still didn't leave one. I don't know what to do with you. I'm putting you in timeout after this episode. But I did it all to help you, right? I love entrepreneurs. And it's not like I say, people are like, oh, I love nachos. No, I really want entrepreneurs to be successful. I want you as an entrepreneur, wherever you are, doesn't matter where in the world you are, doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter your background, race, creed, color, religion, none of that matters. It only matters that you want to be an entrepreneur, that you want to change the world, and that you're on this track to do just that. And I love to see world-changing entrepreneurs. The world is better when you get your vision and your dream to come true. You will help the world get better. And you don't have, not everybody has to drill wells and feed the children. Everything you do that adds value, that creates wealth and equity and knowledge in your own little network, in your own little universe, I call it my economy, we're having an impact. And then they have an impact on theirs, and kind of the rings of the ripples, if you will, of throwing into the pond just keep rippling out and out and out. And that's the network effect that I'm hopeful to see from Awesomers and the Catalyst 88 podcast network. I'm putting this time and energy in, and at some point we'll figure out how to monetize this stuff and put some efforts in there, I suppose. But it's to see the network effect of you guys taking the ideas and the concepts, assuming they resonate with you, assuming you like them, right? Nobody's forcing you to do anything. But based on the feedback I've been given over the years, and particularly related to this podcast series, people seem to dig it. You can take this and you can act upon it, right? And perhaps that needs to be a future axiom. Take action, right? It's so simple. It's so easy. But so few, they're like, no, I better take another course, or no, I better read another book, or no, I better listen to another podcast. What if you just, hit pause for a minute and just took action right now, right? That could be the difference between accomplishing the goal and getting over the finish line versus not. So as much as I want you to listen to the podcast, I want you to read the books, I want you to stay educated. There's a time and a place for everything, everybody. And as an entrepreneur, as an awesomer, no doubt, certainly an awesomer in training, you'll figure out when these things are right for you and for your organization. And everybody's context is different. So, I may have said something here and you're like, that doesn't make sense to me. But you come back a year or 2 years from now and you hear it again, you're like, holy crap, this is my day-to-day life. This is happening to me every day, right? I talked about boomerang delegations. And if you're a single person operation, you're like, I don't get a boomerang delegation because I don't delegate, right? Fine. That one may not mean anything to you now. I guarantee you have 5, 10, 20, 30, 50 people. There's boomerangs flying so fast you need a helmet, right? You get a bulletproof vest, a helmet on, you're like running through the trenches. Like, make it stop. These axioms have all been contemplated, written down, articulated, and then sequenced and presented to you to help you and to help your business. And the only thing I ask that you do is just share this. Go ahead and leave a review, 5 stars, preferably. iTunes is especially helpful. And share this with somebody. That's it. That's a pretty easy deal. I think I'm doing my part. I hope you'll do your part as well. Thanks, everybody. I really do appreciate it. Awesomers.com/237. You can get all the show notes and details for this. And Axiom number 22. It's all done, and that mini series comes to an end. Bye-bye.